thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm a little bit of an outsider from GSMA, but first of all, I want to say thanks to the sponsors of this event, because I think this is such an important topic, and it's a topic that I have worked for 30 plus years in, so I'm telling a little bit my age. But before starting at evolutionQ, I was head of the NIST cybersecurity program, and after retiring from there, spent a little time in private industry, and I'm working now at evolutionQ. And as I work with different communities, this world of quantum sometimes, and I've noticed this a little bit in the panels that I've attended since coming to GSMA, we hear a lot about AI today, and I think AI is a game changer, and sometimes we think a little bit about quantum computing and where are we with quantum computing. We'll kind of put that aside. But I don't think that that's really appropriate. I think there are advanced technologies of both AI and quantum we need to really be taking a look at. And we need to be thinking about what the challenges and the opportunities that quantum computing brings for all of us, and be able to plan appropriately. So what is all this noise about post-quantum? What does that mean? Well, quantum computing works with well-defined components, and it brings results much faster and more efficient calculations to the table. So it brings many opportunities for us. Quantum computers bring many opportunities for us in areas around finance and pharmaceuticals, in health, lots of new innovation. But it is a game changer also in cybersecurity. It changes everything in cybersecurity. And why do I say it changes everything in cybersecurity? Because cryptography is a foundational element of cybersecurity, and it changes the way we look at cryptography. It's interesting to me that one of the very first applications of quantum computing, when quantum computing was really more of a theory and the physicists and mathematicians were looking at it than today's engineering challenges of building quantum computers. Some of the first applications really had to do with this fast and efficient calculations that you get from quantum computers. So some mathematicians took a look, and we saw Grover's algorithm come up with quadratic speedups for unstructured searches. Well, how does this apply to cryptography? It changes the way we look at symmetric key cryptography like AES and says, gee, maybe we need larger key sizes. Okay, that's easier for us to do, to change the key sizes. Not trivial, but easier to do. However, Peter Shor also looked at quantum computing, and as a mathematician, he thought about how he could use quantum computers to also change the game. And he recognized that he could use quantum computers around finding prime factors of integers, which really breaks the kinds of asymmetric or public key cryptography we have in use today across the communications infrastructure. So things like RSA break. It's not a matter of changing key sizes, they actually break. Those are pretty big game changers for the cybersecurity industry as a whole because cryptography is that foundation. So we've known about this for a long time, but the difference here is quantum computers were really a theory, more of a theory when some of this happened, and quantum computing has moved from theory much more to practice today, thanks to the innovations of many companies around the world. Like, I don't work for any of these companies, but like some of our sponsors, like IBM and Google, have done some pretty amazing things in this space. So as we're seeing some of these shifts, we're also seeing some changes in how we look at this problem and what it means today. We have an issue as we're moving closer and closer to a cryptographically relevant quantum computer that can actually break our asymmetric key cryptography, where bad actors can store data of value that has that would be around for a long term and hold on to it in its encrypted form. And as a cryptographically relevant quantum computer comes about, they'll be able to decrypt it. So store the encrypted data today and decrypt it as a cryptographically relevant quantum computer comes about. So that attack of store now, decrypt later is something that we have to consider for some of our high-value long-term assets. And we can take a look at this and think about it from a risk management perspective and think about when do we really need to be worried about some of this kind of change in our own infrastructure, because these are really risk management kinds of challenges for the kinds of data that we have. How long do we need to protect that data? And when do we expect that time for a quantum threat to occur, given that they can harvest that data today and decrypt it later? So we can actually start to be able to quantify when we need to take actions for our own infrastructure and start to make the kinds of changes in our infrastructure to address this challenge. So, as you've heard, how do we get started with this, the kinds of changes that we need to make? Well, standards, since I came from NIST, are a great place to start. Cryptographic standards are really important because you have the public review process of good cryptographic algorithms, and you need that interoperability, so when something is encrypted or digitally signed, it can be verified if it's digitally signed, or it can be decrypted on the other side. So standards become a backbone for cryptography, and NIST, working with the cryptographic community, looked at a number of different kinds of new asymmetric key cryptography capabilities and ran a process to take a look and say, okay, let's get some new standards on the table. And again, they looked at a number of kinds of algorithms to take as part of this, and the entire cryptographic community participated. They ended up, and we'll hear more about this later, but selecting some algorithms for standardization. The draft standards are out now for public comment, probably be standardized on next year if the US federal government doesn't go on this long journey that it might go on starting next week. And there'll be some conformity testing available soon, etc. So some of those critical pieces to get to begin the building blocks that are needed are coming to fruition with the standards. But there are things that organizations can be doing today to get started on this journey. And I think the committee the GSMA committee that's looking at post-quantum already has a great head start. The Security of Telecommunication Networks in a Post-Quantum Era guide that was put out last year is a great place to get started and understand how you can take a look at this challenge and begin to start thinking about that process. You can start looking at risk assessment. I have put something in here because when I developed these slides, your new guidelines weren't out and available yet. But as of Friday, they were available. So I challenge you to erase this slide in your mind and start with the GSMA work that we'll hear about in a few minutes. But really, understanding a good risk assessment process is understanding your data and understanding where you're using cryptography and the kinds of protections that you need from that cryptography. Understanding how long that data needs to be protected. Those are good building blocks to begin with for any kind of risk assessment, and there are things that are highlighted in the GSMA document that was put out last week. So you can start on this, but there's also a look, as we're looking at this, I think we can think about cryptography and the important role that it plays in cybersecurity and that foundational role as how do we build a resilient cryptographic platform? How do we think about a defense-in-depth approach? What are we going to do differently now that we're retooling that cryptographic infrastructure so that we have the kinds of capabilities, for example, cryptographic agility, in case we need to change out an algorithm in the future? It's not as challenging as it may be for this round. What kinds of things can we do? What other cryptographic capabilities are out there that we rely on? One of my favorite ones is key management. People like to talk about cryptographic algorithms, but key management is people, process, and technology. And a lot of times we get excited about putting new algorithms and talking about those, but the people, process, and technology all coming together to get it right, that's really operational and in the weeds and everyday and hard, and it's just not as sexy as talking about the algorithms. Let's face it, the math and the science don't come out quite as much in key management. But how can we approach this? Because we rely not just on the algorithms, but on strong key management. So how do we take a look at that and build these layers into our approaches so that we have defense in depth for this really critical function in our cybersecurity capabilities that we all rely on? And I think we want to take a look at that. I think we want that defense in depth approach so that we have the kinds of resilience that we want. And we want to take a look at how quantum itself brings us new capabilities to support our cybersecurity infrastructure. Sometimes that gets a little bit lost We forget we're going to have classical computers and quantum computers in the same network that we have to protect. And we forget we're going to have quantum capabilities that can help us bring protections across that entire infrastructure. So how do we look at that? How do we look at things like quantum communications and how things can help us there? So I think we want to explore all of this as part of that resilient cryptographic infrastructure that we want to look at and build for the next generation, for 5G, for 6G. Somebody in one of the panels I heard said 6G is really 5G with AI. How about we make 6G 5G with AI and with a strong quantum capability as well? I think we need to think about adding that so that we have the right security capabilities in that next generation to support all of the opportunities that 5G and 6G bring to all of us in the room as customers of the network. And with that, I think today we're going to take a look at the standards. We're going to take a look at the risk management. So we have a really interesting set of panels and experts from around the world to talk about kind of the next steps that we should all be considering. And with that, if I could have the standards group come up, we'll get started. But thank you all.